Well, hello, everybody. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by two sponsors. First of which is BioWave. So thank you to BioWave for supporting the podcast. And if you're wondering what BioWave is, it is a smarter pain blocking technology. It is a life-changing, non-opioid, effective way to block chronic or acute pain available to active duty military and veterans at no charge. 85% of people who use BioWave are going to experience a significant reduction in pain from just one 30-minute treatment, and that is just one treatment. It's been proven effective over 15 years. It's currently used by more than 90 VAs, which is Veteran Administrations. I'm assuming that means hospitals, active duty military, and most of the NFL, NBA, and MLB teams. BioWave is a VA-recognized, VA-prescribed, FDA-cleared product, and it's made in America. So if you want to find out more, visit www.biowave.com, and on there you're going to find some pretty incredible testimonials, specifically from some veterans. And it's designed to block pain at the source, and it's like nothing you've ever tried before. Biowave.com, smarter pain-blocking technology for veterans and active military. If someone you love or somebody you know needs safe, non-opioid, and effective help managing pain, please go to biowave.com and learn how to get a BioWave at no charge. BIOWAVE.com. I would also like to thank Murder Book, the new true crime podcast hosted by best-selling author Michael Connelly, for supporting this episode of Cleared Hot. Returning to his roots as a journalist, best-selling author Michael Connelly now presents the true crime podcast Murder Book. He is working with the actual detectives who inform him for his novels and the television show Bosch. This podcast explores real homicide cases that are traditionally not covered by mainstream media. Murder Book Season 1 is the telltale bullet, and it dives into a 30-year-old Hollywood carjacking gone wrong that apparently tested the limits of the American criminal justice system. Along with that, he has a new book, Dark Sacred Night. And they have been a sponsor of the podcast before. I don't want to tell you too much about the book. I read the book. I liked it, but I also kind of like this genre. It's his latest #1 bestseller. Again, Dark Sacred Night. And the detective, Harry Bosch, if you're familiar with the TV show, and Renee Ballard. You can find Dark Sacred Night wherever books are sold. And I bet you could find it in an ebook as well. Like I said, I like the book. I don't want to give away the plot or any spoiler alerts, so you're going to have to pick that one up on your own. So be sure to check out Michael Connelly's new Murder Book podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from. And the easiest way I was able to find it was to go to the website. 3 words here, Murder Book Podcast, all spelled exactly like you normally would. Smash them together to make one word, murderbookpodcast.com. Now, my guest for today is a good friend. His name is Bryan Callen. Of course he spells his name B-R-Y-A-N. Instead of B-R-I-A-N, because he's special in all of the different ways that special can mean. He is a stand-up comedian. He is an actor. He writes stand-up comedy. He's a podcaster. He is one half of the Fighter and the Kid podcaster. And I met him many years ago when I was just putting my feet into the bucket of podcasting as a guest, not actually as a host. And his podcast was the second podcast that I'd ever been on. We hit it off, and we have been good friends since that day. Incredibly smart guy. I think he describes himself as a performance artiste at all times. And we talk about a lot of stuff on this episode. And I think what people fail to realize is that Bryan, I think, and I would describe him as his heart and soul, he's a comedian. He is hilarious, and oftentimes I think people take him seriously when he's absolutely joking, and it's hard to, on an audio-only format, occasionally to tell when somebody's being serious and when somebody's being sarcastic or facetious. So when you're listening to this episode, remember that the man's a comedian. He is awesome. He's generous with his time. He's generous with his knowledge and with his experience. I love the guy to death. Hung out with him for a couple days when I was in LA, and yeah, I think we recorded a pretty good one. I was laughing my ass off, and hopefully you will as well. So episode 72 with Bryan, with a Y, Callen. Here we go.
Okay, got the red smoke. Gun run, north or south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
Where should we begin? Other than the fact we should have been...
Get out of here. You, get out of here. You're in the way of the fucking...
How can you talk to me like that?
No, I'm sorry.
We should have been podcasting the last 2 days. The ridiculous conversations we've already had.
I know.
That we can't replicate.
I know.
Where would you like to begin?
Doesn't matter. We'll just start talking.
Tell me everything about your life from the day you were born.
Are we podcasting?
Oh, we're live.
Okay.
It's not actually, I can't use that term because this will be posted
My
in
dog
like a
is
week.
fucking in love with you. My dog senses alpha energy. You walked in, she took your shoulders in and she went, that guy kills.
I think she just likes getting pet, and I like animals, so I'll pet them, and they realize, oh,
Yeah, but she's
this
usually
person's
afraid.
harmless.
She's a very sensitive dog, so she's afraid of people. Like, she not necessarily afraid, but she's kind of like wary. And she came right up to you.
Has she always been like that since the day you got her?
Yeah, she's a police dog, so she won't let people in. My buddy tried to get in, she wouldn't let him in.
You were talking earlier about getting an actual police dog. You're talking about a highly trained,
It's a liability. You get a big
or an
male
insurance policy for your house.
Well, that's what I like about it.
Yeah.
The thing is, if somebody's going to come in when you got a big dog already, you better have a gun, which I have.
I don't feel like an intelligent person would come in seeing a German Shepherd or a Malinois.
That's true. They'd be dumb.
So you have a gun. Is it in a safe?
Yes.
Good.
I have 2 guns, and they're both in safes.
Are they near your bedroom, which is likely where you would be when somebody came in?
Yes. One's downstairs, one's in my bedroom.
All right. Can you get into it?
Yeah. I rehearse it. I like to rehearse. It's so weird. Like, I would make my wife do that too. I'd be like, you have to rehearse if somebody's coming upstairs. You have to rehearse opening the safe and getting it out. I'm gonna take my dog. She's got a toy thing and she's nudging it against Andy because she wants you to play. Hold, please.
Tell me more about these scenarios. Now I'm completely intrigued and off topic.
Well, so it goes back to like anything you want to do in real time, you better practice in real time. So in other words, that book on killing and on combat by, I think, Grossman.
Very good
Very
books.
interesting book. Yes. And because, you have to, whatever you do in rehearsal, you're going to do in real life. So there are a lot of examples of, for example, when, I think this was in the book, FBI agents who were shooting on the range, and then they would pick up their brass. And then you'd find guys in real firefights with brass in their pockets.
Dead.
Yeah.
We call it training scars.
Yeah.
If you have to train like you fight is the terminology from
right. But when you drill and you're taking a gun away from somebody and then you're giving it back to your partner so you guys can practice, this guy did that and he gave it back to the robber and his partner had to shoot the guy. So I'm always fascinated with the reality, which is why I'll always exhaust you with my questions.
Yeah.
I love the reality versus the fantasy. And the reality is always so much more linear and a lot more simple or a lot less
and much
colorful.
more boring.
Yeah.
But I like the path we're going down because I have conversations with people about guns and defense all the time. Most people think because they own a gun it makes them safe, whereas in my opinion it can actually make them wildly unsafe.
I agree.
So what kind of scenarios do you lay out for your wife? I can just imagine you. Here it is. There's 3 robbers in the house.
Yeah. 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 You're going to be terrified. You control your breathing. You rehearse opening the safe. So how do you open the safe? Now,
is
you
it
should have...
Is it biometric or is it digital?
So I have one that's digital and the other one's biometric. And I should have 2 that are biometric because I'm lazy, I haven't gotten the other one that's biometric. But so if it's digital, you have to... It's like they always say rehearse dialing 911 because people can't see the numbers.
Yep.
It's what happens. And I learned that when I was a black belt in Taekwondo, and I had, as a kid you get in scraps, but I was always kind of skinny. I'm not a tough guy. But I got in my first real fight, and shit slows down, and your legs feel really heavy, and you're like, that guy's really big, and I don't know anything about him, and I'm on the street, and he might stomp my head in. That's scary shit.
Yep.
So, you learn very quickly that when you're in those real situations, I don't give a shit who you are. I've talked to big-time MMA guys and stuff. It's always scary. You don't know who the fuck you're dealing with. So, but the scenario, I'm always like, look, he's coming up the stairs. Maybe it's two guys, and you've got to figure out. You got to realize that you're here to protect your kids, and you've got to keep the gun. You know, we go through like getting down on one knee and holding the gun right there at the door. I don't know how to do it. I have no idea, but at least have the gun.
Where do we begin?
And by the way, I would suggest rather than having a pistola, I think my Mossberg pistol grip 20 gauge shotgun is a better,
for that scenario. Well, you might, for one, the sight radius is longer, and she's more likely to be accurate, or most people are more likely to be accurate. Mm-hmm. What type of pistol is it?
I have a Glock.
Yep. Is it loaded?
It's loaded.
So there's rounds in the magazine. Is there a round in the chamber?
There's not a round in the chamber.
So it is not loaded.
We practice loading that, and then the whole thing's a disaster.
What kind of sights are on it?
They're just no laser.
No, do they glow in the dark? Are they tritium sights? Are they standard Glock?
They sure don't. Damn it.
How would you aim at nighttime?
See, these are things I don't think about. At the silhouette.
Those are things that most people don't think about. I hear often people talking about the armed civilian, which I fully support. If you want to express your Second Amendment right, go for it. You couldn't have a bigger supporter than myself. But people talk about the right. I prefer to talk about the burden that comes with carrying a lethal weapon.
That's a great way to put it.
And let's not forget that half of every day occurs at night. And more than likely, if we're at dinner last night, you would be able to see your sights, but it would be hard, as opposed to being able to pull something out that has tritium sights that you can line up in any environment. Yeah. Because in the street, you wouldn't be able to see them at night.
Well, the other thing that I know you know this, but I don't think it ever manifests the way you plan it. And
it's because you have no control over the you can control the plan, but not the reality.
There's the element of surprise. It just happens that I said to Steve Ranella we were going to go hunting, and I was afraid we were going into grizzly territory. And I said, dude, so should I bring a handgun because in case a grizzly charges me, I want to have a handgun. And Steve was like, no, Bryan, you should not do that. I was like, I know, but I don't want to get eaten by. He's like, that's not how it happens. You're not going to see it. It's just going to come out of nowhere. You're not going to draw, because I know you've practiced drawing your weapon in high stakes scenarios. Of course I haven't. And he goes, that's not how to look at things. Deterrence, planning so that never
early
happens.
Detection,
all that stuff.
Yeah. My favorite is the hunter that puts the pistol 3 pockets deep in their backpack, and they'll say, "I'm good, right?" And I'm like, "Yes, you're great."
Yeah. But see, I'm fascinated with the reason I really like to narrow it down to violence, even though I don't have a lot of experience with it.
Which is good.
Right. Yeah. But I like maybe violence is even the wrong word, but what I notice about people who are trying to get good at anything, and let's just take show business, stand-up comedy. Acting, writing, these things that require, let's just even a musical instrument. I'm always fascinated with how little time people spend actually doing those things and how much time they spend ensuring that they have no time for that. How they'll take 2 jobs. And so you feel like being busy is the important thing. But if you really looked at how much the average comic in this country, for example, writes and practices, it would be in minutes. It'd be minutes. So people say, well, it takes 10, 15 years to get your voice. Probably, but I see so many actors and somebody, they come, they're younger now, and they come to me and they ask me questions. Now, the reason I know this is because I spent a lot of time doing this as well. It takes one to know one, but the amount of time and the things that so many people do to ensure their failure is always astonishing to me, as opposed to, and I don't even believe in.
Do you think it's unconsciously, or they're just self-sabotaging because that's?
I think it's part of the human condition. and I think the way out of it is, I don't like advice, and I don't like trite sayings, but I do think that the way out of that is not to think of practice as something as work, to put a fence around. I got to go practice. I don't like that. And I don't even like the idea of, I hate things like, you got to work hard, you got to grind. I hate those words because they sound punitive and they just get in your way. I think a better way to say it is this, just a little bit every day. If you can be consistent, I don't give a shit for real if it's 5 minutes a day in the beginning. Really, that is so much better if you do it consistently. Joe Rogan's biggest secret is that dude will do it. Once he starts, it's every day.
I couch it in different terms. I talk about it in momentum. But he's a master of momentum and keeping it rolling.
Yes.
And yeah, I agree with everything that you said. And
being honest with himself and being able to critically assess. So improvement and criticism isn't a knock on yourself. I mean, I suck at everything. You're supposed to suck at everything you try in the beginning. But don't worry, just a little bit. I promise you'll get better under the right tutelage. Make sure you have somebody teaching you, otherwise you'll just ingrain bad techniques.
Spinning your wheels in the sand.
Sure.
I want to go back to your tactical scenario because I'm fascinated by your tactical prowess.
Good, dude. I love when a former DevGru guy is asking me about.
No, it's because these questions and scenarios should be talked about because, again, possession of a weapon doesn't make you safe. Let's say somebody comes into your house, your home. This is a question for you, right? Your wife's asleep. You hear something downstairs.
This has happened. But they haven't been in my house, but keep going. Because I thought it was. It was a minor earthquake. Keep going.
You're convinced that there are nefarious characters running amok in your house downstairs. What would you do?
Okay, so I load my fucking gun. I take the safety off. I keep the gun close to myself, my body, okay? Especially
Which safety on that Glock are you talking about?
No, I have a Beretta 380.
Okay.
All right. Did I mention that part?
No.
Yeah, they don't make them anymore. So I'm told. I don't know. So I got a Beretta 380. The truth is my pistol grip Mossberg shotgun.
Which is probably in the other safe.
I don't know where it is. I've moved so many times that it belongs to some gang member somewhere. So I keep the gun only because I've read about this. You keep the gun close to your chest. All right. A lot of guys have the gun out like this. Not Bryan Callen.
Okay.
Bryan Callen's done his reading. I'm not having somebody take that gun from me. I keep it close to my personage, bro.
Okay.
I got it in the middle of my chest. I'm walking around.
Are you walking around in this scenario? So now you're out of your bedroom. Where are you going? Talk me through it.
I'm going through my fucking rooms. All right.
Okay.
I'm going through my rooms. And I'm looking around. Now hold on. A lot of times I'm not just going into a room. I'm waiting and I'm a listening. And how about this? I've just made this up, but I'm sniffing the fucking air. He might be wearing cologne. You understand?
Well, other than everything that you just described being incorrect,
damn it.
my question for you is why come downstairs?
Well, I was going to say, Andy,
all of your bedrooms are upstairs, right?
Yeah.
So all of the things that actually matter would be upstairs.
This is true.
Do you give a shit if anybody steals anything down
Not
here?
at
That's
all.
what insurance is for.
I got nothing. I don't give up. What are you going to take? My couch, my TV?
So the best move for you, and even in my own house, I think about this. If somebody comes into my house, first off, hopefully you have layers of defense. You have an alarm or an alarm sticker.
I got a dog. I have an alarm, and I got an alarm sticker.
So this is worst case scenario happening to you because those people have already bypassed all that. But why go down the stairs?
Yeah.
You have high ground, a tactically advantageous position. They have to
only
come
one
to
entry
you.
point, really.
Correct. They have to come to you, whereas you would have to go downstairs with your pistol you can't aim in the dark because they're likely not turning the lights on as they're scurrying about.
That's right.
So
by the way, the truth is, I've thought about this, and I'm being dramatic when I say I'm going room to room. What I really do is I take my family and I put them in the back closet. I put them in the back closet so I know where the jewels are.
Yep.
And then I stand there at the one point of entry with my pistola or my shotgun pointed at whatever asshole wants to come up. And I give them a warning, by the way. I go, you come up here, I'm going to shoot you.
Yep. And let's not forget the 911 call at some point. Do not do a warning shot.
That's my wife. She's calling 911.
Yeah, no, don't do a warning shot.
No?
I wouldn't recommend it. Okay. But it's amazing how many people will say exactly what you said. I know you obviously.
But can I just make one point? This is what I really mean. I shoot them in their face or their chest, and then I do a warning shot. So when the police come, I go, I shot in the ceiling.
You don't. Well, I wouldn't
say that out loud.
I wouldn't say that or do that. What you're talking about is an accidental discharge after engaging somebody. But if they're in your house, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to get in the legalities of taking lethal action inside of the United States. But most people would say they're going to go down and they're going to pursue the people that are in their house.
Big mistake.
It's a huge mistake. Who cares? Let the people steal your stuff. I would
never kill anybody for stealing my stuff. Never in my house. I would never do that. I'm only interested in killing a guy who's going to try to hurt my family.
Of course. And to do that, they'd have to come up the stairs and they would be threatening you directly versus somebody who goes downstairs and into an environment now they are interjecting themselves willingly into a tactical situation, and the wheels can come off the bus at any point in time. My recommendation for people is take a tactical assessment of your house. My house, all the bedrooms are on the second floor. Me personally, if somebody's in my house, yes, I'm going to go downstairs. But if you come and you break into my house and this scenario plays out, the person that broke into my house is going to have a serious problem on their hands.
Yeah.
Because I've played with angles for a lot longer than they have, and I know my house and I know the layout, but most people don't meet that criteria.
That's a disaster.
That is a disaster for them. They
you've
won the
broken
wrong lottery.
Oh, God. You broke into that guy's house.
For everybody else, bunker yourself into position. Find a place where you can protect what actually matters is your family. Let them steal your stuff. Get a freaking insurance claim. Call 911. Do all of that. Don't put yourself in needless risk.
If a guy came up my stairs and he had a bunch of stuff in his hands, I would never shoot him there either. I'd go, bro, you got to get out of here.
Yeah, and they would flee probably at the side of the gun. And if they didn't, you might want to shoot that person because it means they're a sociopath.
He might be crazy.
Yeah.
But I had a woman, my neighbors were going crazy. I came home. I was in Venice. And they're like, and I had 2 pit bulls at the time. There was a homeless woman who was homeless but a drug addict but kind of still young and kind of a mess. And she was cooking in my kitchen. She was making me a meal. And she and she was cleaning and she was obviously so high. And I get there and she's like, honey, you got it going on. You got it going on. And the cops came. What do you want to do? I said, don't do anything. Let her go, for God's sake. She was just trying to cook. And she had a pot. I can't remember. She had a pot. They was trying to make a pot roast, but there was no pot roast. It was great. I'm not the guy. I'm the only way I'm going to kill. I'm not going to kill a burglar. I don't think they deserve to die. I don't like people. I don't like rapists and murderers. And I think of a serial killer or something. That's the guy I want to kill.
It's just an interesting conversation because I hear it played out in a variety of different aspects, and I don't know. The thing I want to do the least is to engage in that environment willingly. I'd rather stay there and force them to come to me, or avoid it in general. And I hear a lot of people expressing their desire to engage in that moment, and I don't know why. I don't know if they want to prove something to themselves or they've watched too many movies.
That's what it is. I mean, for me, I travel a lot, and nothing good happens when people are drinking and it's late at night. I never put myself in that position.
Yep.
I just don't. I was in Texas, and some girl was talking to me and complimented me after my show or something, and she was all like drunk, and she was all like, "You're so funny," and I was like, "All right." And her boyfriend came up, grabbed her beer out of her hand, and smashed it on the ground. And I literally just turned around without, like, there was no hesitation. I just went, boom. I turned around, I walked away. I went, boop, and just disappeared into the crowd. Disappeared. I'm not gonna.
That's the varsity move. You don't want to engage in that.
What?
That's going nowhere but to Fucksville.
Oh my God.
It's such you're on a road.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's
I talk a big game. I had been watching these jiu-jitsu videos, and there was this really cool choke using a jacket. Well, gi, but he was talking about a jacket. And I was like, I got to, you learn something like that, and that looks so easy. And so...
but what's not in that scenario on YouTube is the guy's 4 drunk buddies that are going to get involved as soon as you grab his jacket.
Correct. But more importantly, at the time, my wife is very pregnant. I have to be in Dallas the next day for a show. I'm at the Museum Cafe, something I think it was called the World Cafe in Santa Monica, and it's a little show. And my friend is Jamie Kaler is doing stand up, and another guy was doing stand up. I think Jamie was sitting over here, and the guy was heckling him, and I go, "Shut the fuck up." This is very unlike me. Shut the fuck up or something.
Yeah.
And he looks at Jamie, who I think he thought Jamie said it, and he looks at him and he goes, "I'm going to punch you in the face." And I go, "Who are you going to punch in the face? How about punching me in the face?" And I come at him in front of everybody. Now this is
at a comedy show?
This is so not like me. This is so outrageous. This is in Santa Monica. The guy is not tough. He had a bald head. He looked like a bully, but he wasn't big. He wasn't.
Yeah.
And Bryan Callen, with his insanely pregnant wife, goes at him. And they have to stop. So I go, "Stop talking. Let's go. And the guy looks at me and goes, "Yeah, I'll be waiting quietly outside."
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I went, and my wife goes, "Hi, I'm sorry. I'm pregnant. What are you doing? You're going to get arrested. You beat him up, you get sued. If he beats you up, your face is all messed up. You have to be in Dallas. You're going to get arrested anyway tomorrow. And I'm pregnant. What are you doing? What are you doing? What is this? Who is this?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, who am I?" And all of a sudden, that guy's outside. And I go, "I don't want to fight that guy. I don't know anything about him, first of all. And also, I'm not mad anymore. And also, I don't, that jiu-jitsu move's not going to work because I'd have to be close to him. And I don't know. So I said to my buddy, Mike Muldoon, I go, Mike, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to pretend to fight, but he's a big guy. I go, you have to stop me because I can't not fight him. I have to look like I want to, but you have to hold me back. And he goes, how about this? I'm not letting you go out there at all. How's that sound?
That's a good friend.
Yeah. And by the way, guy was outside waiting and the cops showed up because they had heard about it and the cops were there and they moved on. So
is heckling common at your shows?
No. And that's that story about me when I was in my mid-40s is an outrage. I mean, I was 45. What? This even I am an idiot, but I'm not that guy, and we all have moments when we don't think things through.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you have a gun or you've been practicing, that's why you want to test it. You want to see, you're like, well, I have these new tools. Let me see if this.
See, here's the
works.
thing. There's already a gap, I think, for most people. They have a gun. I'm not sure how much they practice. Most people, when they buy a gun, they're excited about the purchase, and they'll use it for a little bit, and then it goes into a sock drawer.
Yeah.
And then it's like, where's that ammo?
Yeah.
It's, I don't know.
Well, boxers, you see pro boxers, they practice to the point where over and over and over, why they're drilling. Well, they get to a point where they can't do it wrong. So when they get hit, when they get hurt, when they're exhausted, they're not sloppy. They don't know how to do it any other way than properly. And that's how you keep yourself from getting your head knocked off. And again, the only way to ingrain those neural pathways is
an insane amount of repetition and practice.
Yeah.
I am hopeful that people are out there taking it that serious, considering what guns are designed, their expressed design purposes for. I have my concerns as to how many people are actually taking it that serious.
Yeah, well, I think that you could take that a step further, and some people believe that guns are expressly for protection, but you would probably say that they're for killing.
I think if you say a gun is for anything other than killing, you're being intellectually dishonest. Right. Because a gun works in one of two ways. Like if you're on the street and a police officer draws his pistol from his holster and tells you to put your hands up, you're doing it because you're afraid of being killed. Mm-hmm. Or the gun functions if the officer needs to, and it kills you. Those are the only two ways that the gun actually has any influence: is fear of death or actually creating death.
That's right.
And exactly right. And I don't think it's a bad thing to say that. I don't think that should change your Second Amendment right, but I think you should be honest about it and then treat it as the tool that it is. Yes, it can be used for sport, but I'm sure a ball-peen hammer could be used for sport somehow too. That doesn't mean it's designed for it.
Yeah, I'm going to listen to a guy like you who's actually seen real combat, and I'm always amazed at how a lot of guys in any subject, the loudest voices are usually people that haven't had any practical. This is going to sound humble, but I do think that when you see what a high-velocity bullet does to somebody's head or face, and you can smell it, and you're right there, I think that's a different. That's a much more intimate relationship with death, with war, with what violence is, and a lot of people don't have that, and so it's still theoretical.
Which is a great thing.
Maybe, but it also is theoretical, and so you tend to. People have strong opinions, and tough to have a strong opinion if you've never actually been in a ring and gotten knocked somebody out, whatever it might be. And in this case, obviously, your experience is a very, very different. It's a very unique fraternity, and I'm sure one that comes with lots of a cost, But
there's a cost, but also a benefit as well.
That's right.
And I think there's a burden to it as well. And my perception of the world is different in some areas, specifically when it comes to firearms. I would just like to see the conversation more. First off, I'd like to see a conversation instead of people yelling at each other. But I'd love to see it shifted from right, which, like I said, no issue with that at all. But let's just talk a little bit more about the burden. Let's balance the conversation between
I've never heard anybody put
right
it in those
burden.
terms. I love that.
It is a burden. To carry around something that is designed to kill is a burden.
Yeah.
And if you're unwilling to train and practice, in my opinion, a responsible gun owner possesses a gun. They're current, meaning they understand how it functions. They're familiar with the function. They have shot in the past at least 30 days. They're competent. They can actually hit a target at, say, 7 yards. So they're current, they're competent, and they have safe storage. All of those things have to occur to actually be a responsible gun owner, in my opinion. And then it should be the weapon or choice of absolute last resort. You need to exhaust everything else as opposed to having it as your primary.
Right. Well, I was thinking about with a guy who has, an intimate relationship with, not only guns and violence, but also, did the prototypical manly kind of route of being a SEAL and then a DevGru guy.
I can already tell you've watched too many movies, but tell me more.
But there is this idea of like, I'm gonna, you did follow the warrior's path, and and now you're negotiating that and doing other things. Oh yeah, I forgot. You also jump off fucking cliffs and fly. That's safe. So you have been a rather extreme guy. You have 2 sons.
Mm-hmm. And a daughter.
But specifically the sons, what a man is in the 21st century, we don't know yet. I mean, what I don't know what they're going to contend with in terms of so much of the maybe what a man is, the prototypical, traditional masculine arena. It was always, hunt and tie knots and
smell of pine at all times.
And I feel like a lot of that is anachronistic. A lot of that is just outdated machinery. A lot of that is sort of like not going to be relevant anymore. And so, how do you what do you find it difficult to teach or impart skills to your son? Do you even try, or do you speak larger in values and principles?
I think the best thing I can do for my sons, but this applies to my daughter. I don't think it really matters to sons or daughters. The best thing that I can do for them is to set the example, as opposed to trying to teach them a lesson. Well,
you set an example. That's a great.
You set an example. The way I teach a lesson is by setting an example. So I'll go and I'll talk to businesses, and when I talk about leadership, I talk about it all the time. You can say whatever you want to say. If you exhibit the exact opposite behavior, the problem with being in a leadership position, and this applies specifically to emotional control. Everybody that works with you and for you and is around you, they're watching you if you're in a leadership position. And it's exhausting, and it should be, because you have to realize that they're ready to repeat and mimic any behavior that you choose to exhibit. So if you're in a business deal is not going good, and your solution to that is you're going to raise your voice and become emotionally involved, don't be surprised when your people do. So when it comes to my sons or my kids in general, if I want them to value physical education and physical activity, the best thing that they can see me doing is working my ass off and not necessarily talking about Dad's over there sweating. I want to get involved and do what Dad's doing. Having a disagreement with my wife, and I'm not perfect on this one, but learning how to have a disagreement in an honorable fashion without raising your voice and yelling at each other.
Huge.
The best way to teach your kids you want them to yell at somebody that they love is to yell at somebody that they love. So I focus far less on the actual lesson and far more on trying to remind myself that they are watching and ready to mimic everything that I do.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, more important than any one particular lesson.
I think I failed at that to an extent.
I fail all the time at it. I will get emotionally involved in stuff, but probably one of the more concrete. My wife has only been around me one time where I actually had to engage in any physical violence, and my kids happen to be there as well too. And I tell my kids every day that I drop them off at school, I'm like, you know what? Don't look for the example. Don't look for somebody to set an example for you. Go out there and set the example that you want to see. And if you see something that's wrong, stand up for what you believe in. So we're out at dinner, and I've told this story on the podcast. We're out at dinner, obliterated drunk couple with a small child. The woman's carrying a small child. How they were sitting at the bar with this kid is still a little bit beyond me. How they achieved this state of inebriation with a child there is beyond me. And they're arguing, and the guy's talking, and I watched him grab the kid, and she was in the bathroom, and he wanted to yell at her, and he's walking down the hall, and he bounces the kid's head off the wall. And I see this. And my kids know what's going on. And I'm sitting there like a fucking asshole, of course, wearing flip-flops. It's always
flip-flops are great for fighting.
This is my primary.
Great for street fighting.
In my head, as I saw this playing out, I'm looking down at my feet. I'm like, God damn it.
Yeah.
What a tactical asshole I am right now, to use a term that I know you enjoy.
I love that.
And I'm sitting there, but the thought process in my head was, I don't want to get involved in this, but I tell my kids every day, if you see something and something needs to be done, you need to step in. And I was wearing my sunglasses on my hat, and I just took them off and I slid them across the table, and I just told my family, I'm like, regardless what happens, you guys stay here. And I went, and we ended up getting a little scuffle in the parking lot. His face got introduced to the concrete a few times. The police came. It was a lights and siren show eventually. And then I went back to the table, and it freaked. I mean, I don't think it freaked my wife out necessarily, but you could tell my kids were concerned, and my son basically said to me, he's like, "Dad, why did you do that?" And I said, "Do you remember what I tell you every day I drop you off at school?" He said, "Yeah." And I was like, "That's exactly why I did it, because it doesn't matter what I say. If you watch me see something like that going down, and I don't do anything about it, what does that say about me?"
Yeah.
And then I also told him, I'm like, look at all these other totally able-bodied males.
And they just
sat there and they put their head down a little bit, because there was a verbal
I have
aspect
no time
of
for
that.
yeah.
There was a verbal aspect of it in the restaurant, and I'm sitting there because I'm paying attention, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to get involved here. I was trying to stop them because I knew they had called the cops, so I was trying to delay.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to get in a car. I'm like, and I don't care about the people. For that couple, go get in a T-bone and get killed. I don't care. But that kid is completely innocent.
Yeah.
And I'll do everything I can to help somebody who's innocent. And I'm just sitting there in the corner of my eye. I can just see these guys lowering. I'm like, you little bitches.
That happens all the time.
Or they grab their phone.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
And of course, the first officer that responded was 5'6". This dude was a sloppy 260.
Yeah.
And the police officer is by himself. He eventually tries to get control of the woman who resists him, and the guy freaked out.
Yeah.
And basically bum rushed the cop, and I was like, this isn't happening. So as the cop was trying to like deal with the lady, I'm just standing there in flip-flops like a douche, trying to like keep distance between the guy, and he bum rushed. I'm like, oh, this is definitely on.
Yeah.
And there's people there with phones, and the cop needed other police officers to show up to actually physically restrain that woman. And I think about it in my head, if somebody had not stepped in, it would have been an issue where the cop is trying to deal with two people, and if the guy bum rushes and attacks the cop, you're at a point where things are going to escalate rapidly, and this drunk idiot actually might get killed.
Yeah.
He's at very least going to get a taser ride,
That's right.
which is not enjoyable.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't work, for most police officers, their only next step is to reach for the thing right next to their taser, which is lethal. Mm-hmm. And all of that, and if that would have happened, all of that could have been avoided if people would have literally just reached into their pocket and found their balls and stood up and prevented that from happening.
Yeah.
It blows my mind to see people who are. I get it. It's scary.
But
I don't want to get in a fight.
So that's
either.
a mindset too, though. That is something I've been rehearsing that in my head my whole life. So I without going into those details, I have.
You seem to be rehearsing many things in your
head. And I yes I am, and I always my biggest fear is that I won't react and right or wrong in that situation. And so
it's
that's
not easy
why
to do. It's not easy to step into that, because I could have easily sat there and said, instead of, "Hey, sir, you're not leaving," which is what I opened with.
Yeah.
I could have just waited till he went by and left and said, "I'll take a milkshake." And then everything that would have happened.
Well, without even going into the details, but my girlfriend at the time, who's now the director, who directed Wonder Woman, and and but we were, I think it was our first date, and this is literally, I was 24 or 25, and we were in New York City down the Lower East Side when it was pretty bad, and we were eating at an Indian restaurant, and I saw this guy screaming while these four dudes were beating him up. The guy took one of those long fluorescent lights and broke it over his head, and then he was screaming. They were kicking and punching him. They were closing in on him the way you see, like.
Why would you hold on? I'm interested in this weapon.
Yeah.
The fluorescent bulb that's going to immediately smash and just.
He just found it. I don't know. I just remember that. I remember thinking that. I go, that's a strange thing to break on somebody's head.
Yeah.
But I remember I was eating, and I saw these dudes, like, it's like those hyenas when they close in on a gazelle.
Yeah. The pack mentality.
Yeah, and I said, "There's a fight," or something like that. And I ran out, and there were these. I don't want to go into I'm going to sound like a complete psycho, but
broad brushes.
She's better off telling the story. But
yeah.
There were these 4 Heineken 40-ounce Heineken bottles. Now I remember thinking to myself, I saw them empty and I go, I can't fight 4 dudes, but I go, I didn't know they make 40-ounce Heineken bottles. I've never seen them. I've never seen them since. And I picked all 4 up, and I began using them. I began throwing them very closely but I was dumb enough and young enough and outraged enough at this injustice that I ended up saving the guy, and they ran away. I think they might have thought I was either a psycho or a cop, but I was using these models, and they ran away. And the guy, he ran away. He fucking ran away.
He probably just wanted to get out of there.
But I turned, and there were all these witnesses who had just been they were just watching, and they had done nothing. And then I scolded them, and my girlfriend was like, "Let's get out of here. This is very awkward." And I can't remember what happened after that, but.
Isn't it amazing what you did remember, though? The details that you did remember about the...
Well, the bottles.
Yeah.
And also, I don't remember picking up all 4 bottles. I don't know if I could ever do any of that. The whole thing is crazy. The whole thing, when I tell the story, seems like a dream. It seems like it never happened and I dreamed this. But the bottom line is, I had been, in my mind, I had probably been rehearsing that for so long because I can't stand injustice. I can't stand it. And I'm not saying I'd always behave that way. But, my wife, we were at the Comedy Store, and I think it was Dove Davidoff, who's one of my brother, one of my favorite. And this fucking dude was going to fight. He was saying words to my friend. And I got up and I got behind him, the perpetrator, and I positioned myself in a way, and my wife, and then the bouncers got dissipated. My wife said, "What were you doing? You were so close to that guy." I go, and she goes, "What were you doing?" And I said, "Well, if he had hit my friend, I was going to punch him in the back at the base of the skull as hard as I can. That's what I was going to do. I was going to stop him from hurting my friend because I'm dirty." And
you were going to break your hand is what was going to happen.
Whatever the
use
case.
Your elbow,
at least I'd be but no, I'm not an expert.
I'm just saying.
But at least I'm in the way. At least I feel like I'm in the way. At least I feel like I can. I'm so terrified that I can't do anything, and my biggest fear is having, and this happens throughout history, where you have to just take it. You have to watch men rape your wife, enslave your children. That's the story of history. And you had to just sit there or die. And
I don't know if I'd have been able to sit there.
Well, and you probably wouldn't have, a guy like you, and you would have been killed.
Yeah.
And it would have happened anyway. That's the reality of it. When you read, if you read Uncle Tom's Cabin, of all books, which is a very powerful book, actually, because it puts such a human face on what slavery really was for it before the Civil War. I mean, whether it's true or not, the legend is that Abraham Lincoln said to Harriet Beecher Stowe, "You're the little lady that wrote this book that caused this great war," because the book was so powerful, and in fact is considered, along with the Bible, probably the most influential book of the 19th century.
Uncle Tom's Cabin?
Uncle Tom's Cabin. I mean, it was such a sensation back then.
I can't say I've read it. I'll pick that up for sure.
Most people haven't, but it's a very powerful book. It's also controversial, though, because it is a racist book. It does paint Uncle Tom as a simple Negro who comes from a simple race and all this stuff, and a kind race. But I think Harriet Beecher Stowe was probably, she'd not experienced slavery. This was from slaves, so she was using poetic license and trying to create a very sympathetic, benevolent, simple creature, so that it tugged on your heartstrings. But what you actually see is very proud and very intelligent. I think there was a character, a very, very intelligent man, a genius, in fact, whose wife and child, they want to sell his wife and child. And then what they would do is they'd say, that 8-year-old boy would fetch a big price. And you're on a farm and you have your child, and they would sell your child. They would take your 11-month-old because he looked healthy. That's a reality. And or the child's blind anyways, too attached to his mother. What would you give me for him? I mean, he'd probably be something. That's what they would do, and that's the reality of slavery. And of course, slavery was the order of the day. So I think about these things where a man had to watch his children and his wife sold off to whoever. It's unbearable. It's unbearable. So these are the things that I think when you read history and you read good literature and things, it does two things. I think one, it outrages you, and it makes you a little bit more compassionate and maybe a little braver. Maybe because I don't know if I believe in courage, by the way. We can talk about that, but it might make you outraged enough that you forget about yourself for a second and you do what's right. You don't weigh the risks of action. Maybe it makes you irrational enough, emotional enough that you take a righteous action.
How come you don't believe in courage? Or we'll start with what would you define courage as, and then why do you not believe in
I
it?
think courage, I think strength, and I think intelligence are compartmentalized. I think that courage is something that usually I would define courage as I'm terrified and I did it anyway.
You understood, weighed the consequences, and then took action.
Yeah.
regardless
So
of
you jump off of cliffs and you fly.
Occasionally, I'm not really flying.
Whatever the fuck it
I'm
is, bro.
falling with style.
The truth is that there are weekends where 5, 6, 7 people die in a weekend. Sometimes I've read about this stuff. It's such a dangerous thing that I often think to myself, but that's because you know how to navigate that space. That's because you're very good at minimizing those risks. For me, because it's a completely dark room, the idea is terrifying.
Yep.
So when I get up on stage with a microphone, I've had decorated veterans say, dude, how the fuck do you get up there? I'd be terrified. Well, I know how to navigate that space, so it's not terrifying. It looks brave. The first time I ever did
uninitiated,
it,
yes.
the first year I would do stand-up, I'd be so afraid it would ruin my day, my week. So I'd get up there and I just would be, it'd be like being in a real fight or something. I was so terrified I could barely move my face. I wasn't brave. I was terrified and desperate. I just wanted to be somebody. I mean, really. Yeah. I was desperate to succeed. In fact, I would say that I'm successful because I was so afraid I wouldn't succeed.
Leave your dog alone. I like her.
I know, I don't like her chewing on that. Come here. My dog listens to me, dude.
Yep, she's definitely listening to you.
She loves you, dude. How is it that that's my dog. I run her, I throw the ball, I feed her, she sleeps with me basically, and she's next to you the whole time. Did you see that? That's ridiculous.
I'm a pet and people person.
My goddamn dog has been at Andy's side, literally just sitting there next to him. Yeah.
So you don't think it exists though, courage? Just compartmentalized?
I don't know the answer, but my suspicion is that that there may be. I think let's put it this way: when people take credit for their courage, when people say to me, "I'm brave" or something,
which is always a ballsy move to say, "I am brave." That is something best said by others about you.
Yeah.
As opposed to about you by yourself.
Yeah, but I always cringe a little bit. Look, you are in a community where cowardice is unacceptable.
But was present occasionally.
Of course it's present. You're a human being. But, when we think of you guys, you SEALs, you SEAL Team 6 guys, you CAG guys, men like me, we all go, fuck. Like, the minute Andy comes into a room, I'm always like, I whisper to my friends, I go, dude, by the way, SEAL Team 6 and holds the world record.
And I want to punch you in the face every time you do it.
Yeah, that's why. But I'm proud of it. I love it so much because it creates this aura around you, and everybody's like, oh fuck yeah, look at him, man. He's kind of a big guy. And it's great. And
for you.
And it gives me credit because I'm somehow friends with a SEAL Team 6 guy, so I must be a little tough too. It's so sad. But I love. But the reason people are drawn to that is they go, that guy's brave. That guy's done crazy shit. That guy has mastered his fear and all those things, which is probably true. But I always find that people who've been in combat and stuff really get uncomfortable when you start calling them a hero, when you start calling them brave, and I understand why. I think it's way foggier than that. I think it's way more complicated. I think you are afraid. I think, I know some of the best MMA fighters in the world, guys who are so decorated and have had 50 fights and have a crazy record. And to a man, they're all terrified before they go out.
I think that just means they're paying attention, that they're aware, that they're alert and present in the moment, and they know what the consequences are.
Yeah, fear and intelligence are pretty closely, if you're going on a mission or a raid and you don't plan to the nth fucking degree and then plan for all the things that could go wrong.
Which is
you're
impossible, by the way.
Of course it is.
So you do the best you can, and you plan something, and then you go out knowing that it's going to deviate.
Yeah. And by the way, maybe courage is the ability to make peace with the fact that you're going to be afraid. Maybe courage is actually getting comfortable in fear. Maybe that's a good way to define it. Of course I'm afraid, but I've learned through my training my mind and my body, how to behave correctly, physically correctly, and mentally correctly in the fire.
That's what I would describe, honestly, my old job as. I was talking a little bit with this about Joe yesterday. I think the biggest benefit or the biggest lesson that I learned after being a SEAL for almost 17 years, a month shy of 17 years, is I left there with the ability to learn. The biggest thing, because every skill set that we were required to do, they would surround us by the apex of whatever it is, and we were expected to learn, mimic, and then repeat the behavior on our own throughout a career. And the faster you can do that, the better you get. And you can apply that mindset of learning to anything, but then you apply all those lessons that you learned leading up to a combat environment. And I certainly saw some courageous stuff from people. I haven't thought too much about whether courage exists or not. I'm gonna have to do a deeper dive personally before I develop an opinion on that. But I saw bravery for sure. But most of the time, what I saw were people doing what they were trained to do because it was their job to do
That's
it.
right.
There was zero thought of like, here we go, guys. Is your GoPro on? This is going to be awesome. It's like, this sucks, but I have to do this because it's my job.
And by the way, this my joke is I can put you in scenarios where you're going to be afraid. I don't care how bad. There are guys who can fight 6 guys in a bar, and they're too afraid to quit a job they hate, or they're too afraid to get out of a relationship, or they're too afraid to actually go for what they really want. You see this shit all the time. So it depends. I can put you in scenarios where you're
if you
going to
get
be
me outside
afraid.
of my wheelhouse, fear's going to be there. And also, I don't want to work with somebody who says, because I have heard people say this, oh, I was fearless. And my response to that is, can you please go as far away from me as humanly possible?
You're a fool.
Or a sociopath.
Yeah.
You're either a fool or you're a sociopath or a liar.
Right, or a liar.
Because there have been plenty. Getting shot at is not awesome. Overwhelmingly dominating a target and winning a firefight, that is awesome. It feels awesome for reasons we've talked about before. But when it's not going your way, it's terrifying. But you still got to move. You still got to do your job.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be near the person that says that they're fearless. It's like the person that says, you don't need to worry about me. I don't have an ego. I'm like, oh, God.
Jesus Christ.
What you just told me is
Jesus
the ego
Christ.
doesn't fit into this room.
Yeah, okay, Rinpoche. Yeah, that's right. I used to be flawed, but now I'm perfect because I have no ego. But intelligence is the same way. That is another thing where some people are. I do actually think intelligence. I do think some people have a facile brain, and a lot of that can just be the ability to self-assess honestly, the ability to recognize patterns, the ability. I don't know enough about the brain, and I don't know enough about the process of learning. But before we get into that, when you say you learned how to learn, what do you mean? Like, what's the mindset to when you approach something new? What's your mindset? Like, say, jiu-jitsu now, you've been doing for a while.
Well, I've been doing it for 6 months, so I've used the term a while, certainly in air quotes.
As well you should, because it's jiu-jitsu. It takes forever. But
my theory when learning is it's interesting, right? Because you have to start off with mimicry, essentially.
Yeah.
A coach gets up there and they say, this is the move we're going to do. And the first thing that since I don't know it, is they teach it, we mimic it. And instead of trying to impart any of my personal bias or any of my thoughts or my YouTube coach, whatever it may be, any of that, I just do exactly what I'm told to do. And I try to do it with as little deviation as possible. So I just try to absorb the information, and instead of putting my own personal spin or flair onto it, if the best shooter in the world says the fastest way to get a gun out of a holster on target is to focus on, indexing your finger so it touches the one particular portion of the holster, so as you pull the gun out, your finger is then prepared to touch the trigger and present it to the target. I'm like, that is what I'm going to do, and I'll master that movement. And
so you're very good at getting out of your own way. You're very good.
I try to
not
do
thinking.
everything I can to get out of my own way and just focus on the instruction.
That's a great note, because I've always said that when I learned what not to think about, I was so much better off. When I learned that it wasn't about attrition, it was more about deletion. It was about deleting. That was.
And the hardest thing I find, and the purpose of buds, I didn't realize this till I went back as an instructor. It's not even necessarily about the tasks that we're asking the students to do. It's about their ability to either handle the stress or ignore the stress that we are externally imposing. They have to follow procedure regardless if they're scared, cold, wet, tired, hungry, fill in the blank of all the options, and in combination of all of those things sometimes. And if you can do that, if you can control yourself and focus on what it is that you're trying to do and follow the procedure, I think that's the step towards mastering the learning process.
It's interesting, yeah.
I
agree with you.
I honestly, I thought about it based on conversations I've had with people. I really think that's the biggest thing. When I started flying, it was the same way. I don't need to know. Like, if you tell me you need to always go left here, my goal in life is to always go left. And I'm not going to think about why until later. Maybe when I have mastered it, I'll go back. I'm like, why do I go left here?
Yeah.
And that happened to me later in my career in the teams. This was the tactic that we were taught. Like, okay, that's the base level of understanding. Not until later in my career did I say, oh, I know why we do that now, and this is where that tactic came from, and I understood the origin. I didn't think about any of that shit when somebody was saying, hey, when this guy says do this, this is the action that's required of you. That's all I would focus on. And that mindset can be applied to anything. I picked up flying relatively easily because all I tried to do is exactly what I was told.
Yeah, that's an interesting mindset, and I think a lot of it is mindset. I think accomplishing things is having the proper mindset. I think writing comedy is having a mindset that is always thinking about that in one way or another, whatever it might be. But I think mindset is huge. It's a huge part of it.
I agree. Did you always want to be a comedian?
No, I
growing
wanted
up?
to be an actor. I wanted to be a dramatic actor.
Thespian?
Yeah, I wanted to be De Niro, Pacino, Walken. I would
happened?
watch those movies.
What
I
the
was
hell,
so,
dude?
so moved by drama.
Early on? Like
Patty Jenkins, the great director who directed Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 2 and Monster. And she said to me, hey, jackass, you're trying to be this brooding actor. You're not that guy. You're a complete idiot. Stand-up comedy, and she got me into that. And then once I found that, it was like a fish to water. It's like somebody was like, "How long did it take to be funny?" I was like, "I was funny immediately."
Yeah,
I was really good right away.
I was funny.
Not true, but I was.
Yeah,
It was
decades
what I was
before
made
I became up on stage.
It was what I was made to do.
But before that, it was your desire when you were a kid was to be an actor.
I studied acting, like theater. I studied the craft of acting for. In earnest, 12 years. I know a lot about acting.
What does that mean? You studied the craft? Like you went to courses?
I was in a class with really good actors, a lot of famous actors, from Burt Reynolds to, these people would come to the class and do scenes in this class I was in. I was there for 10 years, and I worked in earnest and did difficult, well-written, famous plays by Tennessee Williams and Eugene O'Neill, and I tackled some of the hardest stuff in the English language, even Shakespeare, and failed a lot at it, of course. But I learned how to access those sort of emotional recesses, those sort of like those spaces where you need it, and how to call upon them when it's appropriate in using the language that has been given to you. That's difficult. That's very difficult to do, but I learned how to do it. And when I say I learned how to do it, by the way, you never learn how to do it, but you learn how to approach and navigate a role and break down a script. And you learn that if I put enough time into this, I can find the emotional reality, hopefully. And if you have to do it night after night, if you have to become hysterical, become a basket case, cry at this particular time with this particular line because it has to work night after night, or you'll look like a phony piece of shit, that's a big burden. But I have done that before. Yeah. I'm not saying I do it all the time. I've also failed at it.
Are you dying over there?
Yeah.
Here.
I've also failed at it. But when you do Long Day's Journey into Night, and you're playing the character Jamie, I think that's the name, and he comes in, his brother has to be dying of tuberculosis. He's got to hate his father. His mother has to be a drug addict. If you don't come up in with that emotional reality to an extent, please don't walk on stage, because it's going to be very embarrassing, because you're not going to service those lines and you're going to look like a really bad actor in front of a full house.
How much of that training and preparation was required for your role as the preacher in Hangover?
It was everything. I I'm still in character. For me, I still make this character. That's the reality is so much of what you do is, when you do a movie. I mean, I'm a comedian, so a lot of that is you're broad and you're just doing something that's surprising. But you also learn how to make those unconventional choices.
Yeah.
When I found out I was going to be a wedding chapel owner in The Hangover, he was written as a New York guy. You don't remember me? I'm Eddie. What happened? This guy doesn't remember me. But I said to Todd Phillips, I said, maybe he's Armenian, maybe he's from Lebanon, maybe he's from, because he owns this chapel. I can make a good price for you. I can get you chicks, guns. What do you need? I started doing that. He started laughing so hard. He goes, just do all that, and he let me basically improvise the role. And that's to his credit. He's that confident in his story and stuff.
Yeah.
But so in that sense, I learned that too as an actor. I learned to make what's called the unconventional choice. I learned to kind of say, what is this character really, and who is he? And I think even Coach Meller on Schooled and the Goldbergs, he has moments where he cries in that series, and it's very important. You have to see that he's not just this broad Neanderthal robot. He is a lonely man who has one shot at love, who still is in love with his ex-wife. I mean, you have to see that. It makes it so much funnier and better. Comedy, if you look at Jackie Gleason, the great one, they called him the great one. Jackie Gleason, hilarious, one of the greatest sitcom actors of all time, one of the great actors of all time. Jackie Gleason was so funny, you'd be laughing so hard, but for him, he was doing drama. He wasn't letting you smell a joke. He was living this. And you were laughing at this guy who's so frustrated with his wife that he's, to the moon, Alice, one of these days, bang, boom, and it's like, you're talking about beating your wife, but the way he did it would be funny today. So that comes from craft. That's craft, and that's something I worked at so hard. But then I decided acting is thankless, and I wasn't good enough to become a movie star. Okay, next question.
I tell you what, man, I've been around peripherally, not Hollywood, but productions, a little bit on the movie side of the house and some on the TV side of the house. It's a skill that you guys have that truly baffles me. You want to talk about the environment where I would be uncomfortable?
Yeah.
I'm totally fine on the other side of the camera saying, that's wrong, you need to do this. If you were to swing it at me, it's just like, ha, 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 ha.
Yeah, it's a very peculiar skill set.
Yeah.
It's a peculiar type of person. It's maybe even what makes you very good is not admirable. It's not what you'd want on your SEAL team. Some asshole like me who's concerned with how he looks and how he comes across, where he wants, ultimately I don't want to actually do the fighting, but I would like to come back with my shirt open, muscular, with some scars, some strategic scars, and then I want to be the guy who people say, that guy's a SEAL Team 6 guy, and I go, and then ask me, this is what I want. This is my fantasy of being a dev group guy. So ask me what I did in the military, but you already know, everybody knows what I did, so ask me what I did.
So, hey, Brian, what did you do in your time in the military?
This and that, brother. This and that. You see how fucking awesome I am? All right. Now say, what'd you do when the Taliban was shooting at you and stuff? God.
Brian, what did you do when people were shooting at you?
Met them halfway.
God, you've spent so much time thinking about
now
this.
Now ask me if I've ever killed a man. This is another one. This is I would never ask a soldier this. And I by the way, to everybody out there, I'm being respectful. I'm not making light of this. But this is the movie version of Dev Gru Guy. Ready? This is the movie. This is Bryan Callen playing.
What's the question again? What does it
first
feel
of all,
like?
First of all, I'm jacked on TRT because I cannot play a Dev Gru. I'm just too skinny. But I've done 2 cycles.
Yep.
All right. I've had my face tightened.
You're peaking right now.
I'm peaking right now. So now ask me if I ever killed a man. This is the scene.
Brian, have you ever killed a man?
Never stopped to look, brother. All right.
You know what's funny?
Now, wait, one more.
If somebody ever answered like that, I would immediately expose them as a fraud.
I know. Now there's a huge guy over there, and just say, what would you do if that guy attacked you?
See that guy over there, Brian? He looks pretty scared, man. What would you do if he attacked you?
Keep him busy. So, dude, I'm no joke, bro. I'm a fucking badass. All right?
You appear to be a badass with too much time on your hands.
Well, yeah,
think about this stuff.
But that's Bryan Callen, the actor. I don't want to do the actual waking up early in the morning and the training and being cold and, God forbid, the actual dangerous stuff. I just want to say that shit. I want my trident.
I'll mail you one. You can get them at a store or online.
Oh, I see. I've seen them.
Yeah, I know.
I've seen tattoos with the trident and Navy SEAL on it. It's so bad.
I've seen them in airports. I've seen them on backpacks, and the individual wearing it. I mean, I don't want to make a judgment on or judge them by their cover,
Yeah.
But most of the people that I've seen that have them, it's like that's definitely not earned. You might have just bought that somewhere.
I saw a bouncer, and he had a trident, and it said Navy SEAL on his arm.
If it said Navy SEAL on his arm,
He's
if you
definitely not a Navy SEAL.
Correct. That's the guy saying I don't have an ego. It's like,
was
don't
so
worry, man, I
bad.
have no ego. Yeah, you do. You have a huge ego problem. If you have a Navy SEAL word mark on your arm, the odds of you ever having been a SEAL is precisely and exactly 0.
That's my favorite. Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
I've only encountered. I have so many buddies who they live for those moments too to find that dude.
Oh, yeah.
And I've only had one chance at it, and it was an elderly gentleman, and it was not nearly as exciting as I thought it was going to be. I asked him the base because I mean I can in 3 questions I'm going to know if you're full of shit because certain things they need to come off your tongue pretty quick.
Yeah.
Number 1, what BUD/S class were you in? And when they start with 14 Charlie X-ray Delta 5, I'm like, oh, okay, we're done here, like that one.
No.
But most of the time nowadays they've done some internet research.
Yeah.
So this guy hadn't because he was older. He's like, I went through the class in '67. I'm like, oh,
That was
God. First off, there's 6 classes a year, asshole, on average.
Yeah.
So I knew he was already done, and then I started asking him. He's like, yeah, I served in Vietnam with SEAL Team 3. I'm like, that's cool because they were commissioned in the 80s, but tell me more.
Did you say that to him? No.
Later. What I'd like to do, in my
Give
mind.
him rope. Give him rope.
That's what in my mind, in these scenarios, I was like, yes, I'll just give you more rope. But like I said, it doesn't happen to me enough. I don't know if I'm upset or I'm just let down because I'm waiting for the explosive one. But this guy, I think, realized pretty quickly what was happening, and he's just like, oh, okay, cool, I got to go. I never really got the chance to just fully expose the guy. I just kept asking him questions, and you could tell I was getting to the depth of the fraying edge of the knot as in his knowledge.
Yeah.
But yeah,
We were at, it was Joe Rogan and myself and Steve Ranella and a guy named Bryan Callen, who is a hunting guide and one of the best people I've ever met. I spent a week with him, but when you know somebody's got real character, like a man of deep character, and that's what he was. He's a beautiful human being, and Ryan, we went to this cafe, and the owner had a shrine to the Marines. He was a Marine, and he had his hat on that said U.S. Marines.
likely a red truck in the parking lot.
Yeah, it was a shrine, and I think it was when it was Benghazi or whenever it was.
Yep.
And he comes up and he goes, they got our guy. They got one of our guys. Those bastards. And we're like, oh Jesus Christ! And I'm looking at this guy. I mean, you could just see what a fucking phony he was. What a phony this fucking guy was, and older. And Rogan, who suffers no fools. Rogan's like, oh Jesus Christ. And I can't help but to be a smartass, and I'm fucking with him, and I'm like, listen, this is so how long you had this place? And he goes, have you been here a long time? It's like a little town in Wyoming, or Montana, actually. And we were hunting the Missouri breaks, and I go, is there any way I could blow around here? Just fucking with me. He goes, what? And I was just doing that shit. Long story short, the guy starts yelling at a young lady in the kitchen who was working, and this is probably the only job around, and he was being the owner, being a real dick. And Bryan Callen couldn't take it anymore, and he stood up and he goes, you should quit right now. I'll get you a job. I'll find you a job. Quit right now. Get this. And the guy said, hey, and he goes, I'm not talking to you, sir. I'm not talking to you. And the guy goes, Semper Fi. He panicked. And then he basically scolded that guy and said, I will give you money right now to quit, and I'll find you a job personally. You should never have to take shit from a phony son of a bitch like this guy. And he just laid down the law and exposed this guy. And he goes, and furthermore, I don't think you were ever a Marine. He said something like that, which was true.
Took a scalpel to the heart of the issue.
It was so beautiful. And this guy, as we were leaving, I heard him again go, Semper Fi.
Oh God!
The whole thing was kind of like a one for the good guys. I think I just told that story because I just wanted to give a shout out to Bryan Callen, wherever the fuck that guy is. He's the best. But
what do you think it says though about the individual that chooses to live a lie like that? That's what.
That's what
what baffles me about those type of things, or the stolen valor and Like, what is going on? That instead of trying to accomplish something for yourself, you're just going to make up and.
So you just gave me the button of what the reason I told that story and I had lost my track was because the one thing I want to impart to my children is never be an imposter. You can't be an imposter. That might be. I think Dante in his Inferno. I think imposters were below murderers even.
Were they really?
Yeah.
In the layers of
they
hell?
were the lowest. Yeah. Imposters are horrible, and we all tell white lies. You can't tell a big lie. You can't, man. Don't tell, and I'm a liar, so I'm saying, but don't tell the real lies. Like don't be an imposter.
Yeah.
Like this guy Jussie Smollett who orchestrated this whole attack on him and stuff.
Which is unraveling like current time right now.
Yeah,
it's getting worse by like the
you'll
hour.
never live it down.
Yeah.
It'll ruin you for the rest of your life. It's so wrong. It's so bad. It's so bad that I cringe when I hear those things. I go, oh, con men and imposters, to me,
the worst.
I hate them. I hate them.
Yeah.
I hate swindlers. I hate people that make their living that way. I have such a.
Do you think that those people are comfortable in their being, or are they just a tortured soul?
I think that they're sociopaths and narcissists. I don't know how you can. I really don't know how you can make a living in any industry where you're hurting people, where you're producing a product that's terrible for them or whatever. You know, I think if the tobacco industry, I'm a libertarian to an extent in terms of let people make their own choices. I believe in personal responsibility. That's and self-reliance. That's an important American value. I think that should be held on a high pedestal, but and should be reached for. But you know, when you are manipulating a product and you're manipulating the nicotine levels, and you know deep down not only that it's addictive, but that it does cause debilitating diseases, and you are hiding that fact and mounting an assault and trying to figure out a way to get more people to smoke at a younger age. If that's what you were doing, then shame on you. Then you should be exposed. Should you be put in jail? I think if I don't believe that, because you're just a piece of shit and you have to live with yourself. It's the people that smoked that, you know, should have known better. But sometimes you get caught up when you're younger. When you make smoking really cool and you spend all your time trying to get people to do something poisonous, and you made a lot of money off it. That's how you made your living. I couldn't live with myself that way. That's a difficult example, but I don't want to be an imposter. When I do my podcast and we have, you know, these commercials and stuff, my rule, Brennan and I, we always said, and Rogan always talks about this, I'm always like, you got to believe in the product, man. You got to at least believe in the product. You know, Brennan and I had a whole thing about Burger King, and I don't eat Burger King. But
Did they come to you guys for a sponsorship?
Yeah, Brendan does.
Yeah.
But for a long time, I said, I'm not doing that. So it's sometimes you get into these things, but Brendan loves Burger King. He actually fucking eats it. And I was like, all right, you know, I mean, if you eat it, you know, I'm just not a fast food guy, and you know, we can you can get into these gray areas where you might say, fuck it, you know.
How'd you and Brendan meet?
I was Nate Marquardt, who's and is a friend. I just haven't talked to him, but I love him, and was my favorite fighter. I mean, Nate was such a beast, and still fights. I mean, you know, but this is a killer. And he was an extra on Warrior, and I got to know him. And he and Eve Edwards, I spent some time with, and I love both those guys. And I had a talk with Nate about performance psychology. Anxiety, and fulfilling other people's expectations of yourself, which is a huge trap for anyone in performance. Fighters, I don't care any athletes, performance. And the reason I know a lot about performance psychology is because I had almost had a breakdown. I almost quit acting, went crazy because I would suffer from debilitating anxiety. There were about 6 years of my career where my throat would close up. Same thing happened to Laurence Olivier, by the way, and has happened to many performers. But I
physically manifest itself.
I didn't know if I could get out of it. I mean, I didn't know if I could ever get out of it. I was lost in this terrible because I was afraid to fail, and everybody was telling me I was going to be a star. And all I was doing was going, what if I'm not? What if I'm a phony? I was asking terrible questions. My primary questions were not helpful. What if I fail? What if I'm a phony? What if I'm not talented? What if I never make it? What if this is it and I peaked?
The ability of human beings to sabotage themselves is almost limitless.
Huge part of success is learning how to talk to yourself. A huge part of success is changing that question, reprogramming your brain to ask yourself a helpful question. Like, what do I got to do today to get closer to my goal? Who do I really want to be? What do I want to do? What do I, you change that question, and then shut that shit off. It goes back to learning what not to think about. Fuck off and just assume the position. But I saw Nate kind of, and I'm speaking maybe a little out of turn, but I saw, what I saw was, as he got more fame and got better and better, I started to see him trying to fulfill this idea of being a knockout artist and things like that. And we talked about it. We had a really candid conversation about the pitfalls of success and the pitfalls of listening to your fans, which I think is way more dangerous. I think listening to the positive is actually more detrimental in many ways than listening to the negativity. Negativity is good because you can buck it. You can go, oh, you think I'm a pussy? You think I suck? Watch this. So that can be motivating. When people say that you're amazing, that you're great, that you're
it can steer you down the wrong path.
Well, you'll start to try to be that. You'll start to be a specific kind of fighter. He knocks people out right away. Well, fighting's not like that. Fighting is whatever's presented to me in the moment, I have to react to. I might have to wrestle him, might have to kick him. I don't know. So when you get into the octagon, you have a strategy, you have a plan, but you better be also in an improvisational mindset. You better be willing to be open to whatever comes at you, because you're going to be reacting. And I think performance is exactly the same way. When I get up to do stand-up, I know where I'm going, but my mantra is, I always say, I don't know, and I go out there, or I say, go away. And I go away, and I get up there, and I just let it take over. And that's when I really do it.
Yeah.
So we had a long talk about that, and he, I think, found great value in it, and he should have, because I was older and I'd been through it, and I know what the fuck I'm talking about. I don't give a shit who you are, and I don't care how good you are at fighting or anything else. You don't know more than I do about performance. You don't. I don't care. What? I don't care. I'll argue with that all day long. That's the one area I'm an expert at, failing. I know a lot about failure, and I know a lot about getting in your own way, more than anybody, so fuck off. And so he had me come and talk to the Ultimate Fighter, and Brendan was a coach.
Okay.
Yeah, so Shane Carwin at the time at Big Country were both the coaches, and I got to know Shane, and I got to know Brendan, and Brendan moved to L.A., and he was like 5 minutes away from me, and we just started. I just loved him. He was so funny. He came to see me do stand-up that night, and we just got along. He had a great sense of humor, and I was like, this fucking dude is. And Rogan and I were hanging out with him one time, and he started making us laugh. He was so self-deprecating about what an idiot he was and stuff, and I was like, this guy's fucking. And Rogan goes, he's hilarious. I go, that's why I hang out with him. I don't hang out with him because of his big muscles. Well, I do, because I'm gay, but I mean,
a lot of people think that, by the way,
that I'm gay.
Yeah, good.
I will never dissuade them. I love that. Oh no, God, I'm not gay, you guys. If anybody's listening, I like girls. Fuck you. Oh no, the random guy thinks I suck dick. What? Maybe I do. I'm hoping I can. I'm hoping I just get to a point where I'm sick of it and I just shack up with a big old strong seal.
Oh God.
I wish I was gay. It'd be so much easier. It'd be so much easier to have a boyfriend. Women have a deep psychology that I find to be a complete mystery. Anyway, let's not talk about me being gay.
So where'd the podcast come from? Because you guys are like 400
so I
episodes
said to him,
deep.
More than that, I go, let's do a podcast, and because he had done mine, and I was like, this guy's good on a mic, and then I said, we'll do an MMA podcast, and he goes, I don't want to do that. I want to just talk about everything, and that was it.
Yep.
That was it. And he took to it like a fish to water. He'd never done it. I think I kind of gave him a crash course. I think, and he just is doing what he's supposed to. He's doing. That's why he quit. That's what Rogan saw him. Rogan goes, this guy can do other shit. He goes, he doesn't want to fight. He's got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. He doesn't want to fight. He's nervous.
That's got to be the worst place to be as a fighter. 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
You get knocked out.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah, that's not good.
That's why guys like Cowboy Cerrone are so special.
Because he's both feet in the bucket.
He's so special, and he just keeps getting better.
His story that he told on Joe's podcast about the cave diving and getting caught.
Oh my God. He's such a good person, by the way. Like, I know him pretty well.
Yep.
He's such a deeply good guy. Like,
That's good to hear.
When you get to know a lot of those guys, like Thiago Alves and Dustin Poirier and Mike Brown, the coach.
I don't follow fighting nearly as
they're
closely
such
as you
good
do.
guys. They're so fucking humble. They've just been humbled, so they're just different. They're different dudes, man. They're different dudes.
You think you'd be sitting here today if you hadn't experienced all the failures that you have, that you talk about?
Absolutely not. I mean, my childhood was so chaotic, and
What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, you have these seminal moments in your life. You know, when I became a wrestler, I would never be who I am without wrestling. I don't care what anybody says, but you know, when I chose to be an actor, when I chose to be a stand-up comic, you know, these turning points in your life. But my childhood was, I was born in the Philippines. We then moved to India, where I lived in Calcutta and then Mumbai, Bombay at the time. Then we moved to Lebanon, and then we moved to Pakistan, and then we moved back to Lebanon.
What was driving all of this moving?
My father was a banker, and so we then moved to back to Lebanon, where we and I know I've said he's CIA and all that. I'm sure he worked for, you know, whenever you're in a bank, you probably work. He was a Marine, and he probably did other stuff. But no, he was not a deep cover fucking CIA guy. Which, by the way, the reality of that is also not what people think, right, Andy? You would know these
100% the opposite in my experience.
Yeah, and I've known enough CIA guys to know that's also the case. I love how the web is full of like the CIA controls. You know, all right, dude, it's a bloated bureaucracy.
Jason Bourne wears a pair of like tortoiseshell spectacles and sits in a cubicle.
My favorite is that movie when I was sitting with my buddy who was an athlete, a real athlete, and you see Matt Damon running down the beach, and he's kicking his legs really high, and my buddy just started laughing, and his girlfriend goes, "What?" He goes, "Well, he's not an athlete, I'll tell you that much." So fuck Jason Bourne, because he's running straight up, not forward. So then I after Lebanon, we moved to the war broke out, and my father was not able to get back in the country. We lived in the Holiday Inn. We had to sleep. It was really wild. I mean,
how old were you at this point?
I was in third grade, second and third grade.
So old enough to remember, old enough that it was formative.
Old enough to know the guns. I could hear the guns every night, and I saw jets bomb a gas station. I saw some stuff, but it was the unknown. It was always very scary.
Okay.
Very, very scary. And then we had to spend time underneath the building in the garage, and you sleep on the floor, not on your bed. And then we got evacuated to Greece. And I lived in Greece for 3 years almost, and then we went to Saudi Arabia, and I lived in Saudi Arabia. So I didn't come to the United States really until I was 14 years old. And
wow.
I went to boarding school because my family was still in Saudi Arabia. And in Saudi Arabia, they didn't allow foreigners to go to high school there. There was no high school for foreigners, so you had to go away. So your choices were Switzerland or the United States, but everybody would go to boarding school. And I had a choice between Tassis, I think, and Switzerland, and where I would have had to speak French, and I spoke a little French because I had gone to a French school in Lebanon, but not well enough. I would have had to really kind of learn it, which I would have done quickly probably because I'm a genius and a linguist. And thank you. And but then I went to boarding school in Northfield, Mount Hermon, up in Massachusetts for 4 years. And then I went to college down in Washington, D.C. for 4 years. And then I went to New York, and I worked in a bank for 2 years.
Did you really?
And then
I did not know that.
Yep. I worked at Lehman Brothers, the now defunct Lehman Brothers, and at Goldman Sachs as a temp, ladies and gentlemen. At Goldman Sachs. And was hopeless as a banker. And I've always been hopeless on pretty much everything but making my friends laugh. Not a bad athlete. Not a bad high school wrestler. Not bad. Not bad. Black belt in Taekwondo, everybody. Relax. You've seen my fucking kicks. The bottom line is I was good at one thing, really, which was making people laugh. That was the only thing. And then after I woke up from a nap, and I said, if I don't become an actor, I'm going to hate myself.
What a bizarre post-nap thought.
I know. I said, I said to my roommate, I said, should I be an actor? And he goes, fuck yeah. And I go,
that's a
done.
good friend, though.
Yep. And my father, who I will always be indebted to, who I love so much, I said to him, he grew up poor in Wisconsin, a farm boy, Marine, and he said, I said, I want to be an actor. And he looked at me and his face fell, and the panic of having a son he'd have to support the rest of his life and a failure for a son. And you know what he said to me? He goes, you got my money. He had taken me to South Bend, Indiana to watch a Notre Dame game. He flew me there. He was a pilot. He had a little tiny Cessna or whatever at the time. And he said, you got my money. In other words, I'll pay your rent and I'll give you money. And
that's awesome.
I never forgot that.
Yep.
I'll never forget that. And it was very hard for him, and he didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And so now I'm the international star that I am, and you're sitting in my mansion in Hollywood. So
whatever you want to tell yourself.
Whatever, Andy. What fucking ever. That's the story of Bryan Callen.
Would you want your kids to follow in your footsteps in the industries you're in?
I sure wouldn't. I don't know what this industry is going to be. I think my son is going to be me. My son has all my strengths and all my liabilities. He is
carbon
my
copy.
Fucking mini me. And my daughter is not. My daughter is a type A. I'm not worried about my daughter at all. My daughter's not allowed to mention fucking college because she's already getting ready for it and she's 10. She plays the violin. Practice for that girl is she reads 400-page books. I can't take it. I can't take it. I can't send her to her room because she's like, cool, I'll go read.
I'll go create a new element in my room, not a problem.
Yeah, I just have to be there for my daughter and love her and just eat shit, which is what, she rolls her eyes at me. She can barely stand me, and to her credit. So, I don't know.
My 10-year-old daughter has magical powers over me as well.
Yeah.
I can get a full knockdown, blown out argument with both of my sons, but if I see the crocodile tears welling up in my daughter's eyes, I'm done. Yeah, it's over.
No, you're done. Well, my daughter is amazing because I threw a tantrum. Don't remember what it was, just generally.
So it was definitely about something important.
Yeah, and I was fighting with my wife or something, and then I was like, and then my daughter, they went in the car. My daughter comes back out and goes, "Excuse me, you're behaving in a ridiculous manner. Now get out there and say sorry because we have to go." She literally did that at 10, and I was like, she goes, and she was whispering, "You're behaving. This is ridiculous, and you're not behaving well right now." She, like an adult, shamed me, and I went out and I said sorry. So
it sounds like my 13-year-old son. My middle son is likely right now creating a feat of engineering. Like he's so. I don't know where he gets it from. He is so ridiculously smart. Yeah. And he'll do those things. He's oftentimes socially obtuse. He says some stuff that at times he shouldn't, and he's a genius but can't remember where his shoes are, that type of stuff. Yeah. But he in an emotional level wants to correct those environments, and he'll get in there. "Dad, what are you thinking about when you say those things?"
God, that's great.
Yeah, and it's just like, wow, I just got completely crushed by a 13-year-old who's 100% correct, by the way.
Yeah. Well, Khalil Gibran said that your children come through you, not from you. That's an important thing to keep in mind. Don't try to make them your carbon copy. They're not. They have their own
I hope
thing.
they're nothing like me. And I'm so happy that none of them have expressed a desire to go down my old career path.
Well, I mean, you've been pretty extreme. You've handled it remarkably well, and
I don't know how aware they are though, because I never talk about it with them. It's if they ever have questions, my deal with them and my wife included is if they have questions, I'll answer. But I don't think they just don't care. I'm just dad.
Yeah, well, you should be.
Like they've been there in Switzerland, and I'll fly over them in my wingsuit and land right next to them, and they're just like, "Hey, Dad!" They don't give a shit what I do, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
So
I don't think that you want to be. I think that'd be a lot to live up to. I think that standard is a lot, and I think especially when you have boys, if you set this extreme example of masculinity and courage and all, that's a hard thing to reach for. I think letting them find their own way. Yeah. Because a lot of times that can sort of create a feeling of inadequacy, and then they'll try to become something that they're not. You're either what you are or you're not. And
well, I definitely don't ever want to be the measuring stick that they view their life by. I'd rather be a springboard that launches them far beyond any measuring device that they could use.
Yeah. Hopefully they learn, I always say that, my favorite thing is people are like, well, I was going to go be a Navy SEAL, and I was going to play D1 ball, but cool, were you? You didn't, though, right? You didn't? You didn't. And one of the great things about doing sports is I know unequivocally that I could never be a Navy SEAL because the cold turns me into a coward. Forget all the other stuff. I would break. I'd ring that fucking bell. I'd be like, donuts! Fucking tell my children I love them. Gang, gang, gang.
We used to bring coffee and donuts out in the middle of the night.
You fuckers.
Steaming coffee. Like,
you guys suck, man.
Well, no, it's
dudes are just freezing, like
freezing,
sitting in that
and
water.
it's glorious. Well, I say it's glorious because I got to experience both sides of the coin. On one side of the coin, it is not glorious.
Yeah.
When you're hypothermic in the middle of the night, and the instructor staff will put out a table, a foldable table, and they'll fill the top of it with steaming hot chocolate or coffee, whatever your flavor may be. So a few donuts, perhaps, glazed chocolate, whatever you want. And we say to the class, we're going to stay here until one of you quits. You're going to lay in the ocean. But whoever quits can come up here and have as much coffee and donuts as they would like. And we turn around and we send them into the ocean.
Dude.
And eventually somebody quits. And then how you really break them is you go, we need one more.
Oh, you motherfuckers. Oh, my God. How do you ensure people don't go get hypothermic?
The safety net that the students do not see is robust. So Hell Week is probably the most dangerous time from a physiological perspective for the students because you're up for so long. You're exhausted, which does loopy stuff to your brain for sure. But then you're constantly active, so your physiology gets a little goofy. But at all times, there's a couple MDs present. And like surf torture, or what they call surf conditioning now, because, you know, God forbid we call it what it actually is this day and age.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
God forbid we call something tell the truth.
You know, when I was as a student, they're like, all right, we're going to punish you now. And when I was an instructor, we're going to remediate you. Like, come on. The end state's exactly the same, but it's like, what are we doing here? Making different, noises with our, like, come on.
Right.
But one of the main things you do, which this probably would have been the evolution that got you, because you self-expressed the lack of enjoyment and love for cold water.
And by the way, anybody listening, it's only because I'm fucking shredded. All right? So I don't want to hear it. It's not because,
So arm in arm, the class lines up. You link arms with the person next to you. You face the ocean. You walk out into neck-deep water, and you lay down. And the surf beats over the top of you, and it eventually washes the entire class up onto the sand. You stand up, and you go back out. Of course, much like we were talking this morning, the drill you were doing at wrestling camp, where you have the person on your back and you're going for a quarter of a mile. The way to make that evolution easy would say you guys are going to do this until you have covered 1 mile. The hard way to do it and the way to break people is you're going to do this until I tell you to stop. Right? You move the end state.
You can't see the end.
Yes.
You can't see the light.
So you have no idea where you are, and you can then just focus on how uncomfortable you are, which then causes you to quit.
Yeah.
So the students don't know how long they're going to be in the water, but as the instructor staff, we have very strict criteria, and we're taking the temperature of the water out of their sight. There's vehicles with the headlights facing them, but behind those headlights are doctors. There's a guy off on the side with a thermometer in the water who's looking at it, who then references it off of a chart. And we have rules. For this temperature of water, you can keep them in for this long. Then you have to pull them out for 5 minutes. And the doctor will walk up and down the line and kind of do a very quick, it's not thorough at all, but he's doing a quick assessment, and then turn them around back in the water.
To see if you're delirious and you're actually
everything that the kid, and people will get pulled, and if they get too cold, they will get warmed up, but they have to go back into the class.
One guy who didn't make it through buds, he told me basically he got in a fight with another seal, and he was.
I've never met anybody who's quit buds. They either broke both of their legs, their entire body, or fought an instructor.
That's what he said. And he did say that he kept hypoing out. Then they stuck a thermometer in his ass and taped it to his leg to watch it. So he did go through. I know, but
most of the time we just let the tail of that come out the back of their pants so we know who it is. And generally, if I'm being completely honest, we would just use the foreign students as the thermometer check.
Is that right? That's great.
People will get mad at me for saying that, but it's 100% true. Yeah.
We're going to put this in your rump.
But the thing is, and there's a medical check, and there's meals, and as a student, Hell Week is a complete blur. Like, I almost remember none of it, but then I had to go back and I worked the classes as an instructor, even though I didn't teach that phase. So you did a shift just to help out because it's a 24-hour, 5-day evolution basically. So you need multiple instructor staff, and you see all of these layers. Like, we are going to give them X amount of sleep on Wednesday. You get about 2 hours. Start Sunday, you sleep on Wednesday for about 2 hours. You finish up on Friday. But there's very little room and latitude for creativity. It's based on a 3-ring binder.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
And it works.
It's insane.
It
works.
It's designed to find whatever it is that you don't like.
Yeah, but is there any sort of logic in the idea that we are freezing dudes? You could have really great soldiers that just can't deal with the cold, and most of the climates we fight in now are warm. So is there or
you could make that
you
argument
know, I mean,
for sure, but
you might be
you
just
can't.
getting a specific body type. You guys might need a fucking thin man cheetah like myself.
Enough of those will make it through.
Yeah.
Because the difference between the man cheetah that is not there at the end of training and the one that is there at the end of training is what's between their ears.
Mental. Yeah.
And that's why when I was talking to you this morning, it's a huge and important thing for people to understand. There's a difference between failing and quitting.
Yeah.
Failure is largely out of your control all the time. Actually, I don't know if you ever really can truly control whether or not you succeed or fail, but you always have control of whether or not you quit. Right. And that's what we're looking for in buds. That's really all it is are you afraid of being underwater? Is it the cold that's your thing? Is it the exhaustion that's your thing? Is it the combination of all those things that your thing? Depress a human being until they're at their lowest point and then watch how they behave given a set of tasks and criteria.
Right.
And if you can make it, awesome, welcome aboard. And if you can't, well, it's hard to say. You'll never know the lives that you did save, but it was hard for me as an instructor. I administered a diving test, and you only get 4 shots at it. You get 2 one day, and if you fail both of those, you get additional training. And I would do a lot of the training. I would sit there and I would go with them over all the criteria. And the test, it's not easy, but it's also not incredibly complex. What's hard is that I, as an instructor, get to choose when you breathe. So I am in control. It's all about stress, not about diving. And then they'll fail 2 times on the next day. And these guys come up and they know they've failed, and you're debriefing them as a student. I mean, this close, they're standing in the water, you're standing in chest-deep water. It's like, listen, you just failed. You need to go to the desk and check in as a failure. And they break down crying. Is there anything that I can do? This is what I've wanted to do for my entire life. Yeah. And you can tell that their dream is ending in that moment.
Can they come back and try again?
They can. And I wouldn't explain it to them necessarily in that moment. I was certainly empathetic to how they were feeling. But what I had to do as an instructor was say, hey, compose yourself, get out of the water, go check in at the desk as a failure, and best of luck to you. And I wouldn't spend too much time with it because at the end of the day, you might be saving that person's life.
I agree. That's a really harsh but true thing to say. I mean, you may not have look.
Because you don't
part
know,
of the reason that when you hear somebody's a Navy SEAL in a room, the reason we all cock our heads and look over there is that guy's distinguished himself. Whatever you want to call it, that's a very difficult thing to. Getting your trident is a very fucking difficult thing to do. Which is why when the shit hits the fan, we go, I hope those guys, are there any CAG guys or Dev Group guys, whatever it is. I mean, we know that's the best. If you want to be the best, then the best is not for everybody. It's just not.
That's true of
and
everything,
by the way,
though.
that's a huge lesson to learn. The huge lesson to learn, even if it's heartbreaking, is to know what you're good at, what you're supposed to do. You may have a dream to play in the NFL or be a Navy SEAL, but you just may not have the physiology. Yeah. You may not have the mindset for that. It goes back to what your strengths are, what your intelligence is, what your courage is. You may be strong, intelligent, and brave in another field. Maybe comedy's for you and not fucking running punts back in the NFL, Brian. Since I can deadlift. I deadlifted 260 and it was heavy.
I mean, don't tell too many people that.
No, I can get it to 305 right now. I don't give a shit.
It was funny is if I didn't have, or not funny, but interesting to me when I think back, if I didn't have the operational experience that I did before I went there as an instructor, that decision to treat that student that way and be crisp about it would have been more difficult for me. Yeah. But having seen the objective consequences of, or just not even, it wasn't really the consequences, because you can die in what I used to do doing everything correct. You can do everything by the letter, by the law. But this goes back to, and then you can still get killed. And so you have to have a respect for the environment with which you're going to be operating in, which gives you a much greater respect for why the training is the way that it is. And you arrive at that moment with that student who is literally popping snot bubbles and crying about how this is the end of my life. And you realize, okay, I feel for you, but get the fuck out of the pool and go check in.
So this is why I respect this process so much, because what you're talking about is the SEAL teams is a hierarchy of competence. You make it and you continue to escalate if your competency level is measurable and you get results. My big worry in this very politically correct climate.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
This social Marxism is that we have people trying to enforce equality. It has nothing to do with competence. It has to do with whether or not you have ovaries, whether or not you're melanin heavy or melanin light.
Yeah.
And we're looking at these physical attributes. We're saying we need more Asians, more blacks, more trans people, whatever it is. And of course, everybody wants an equitable playing field, but to our great peril, do we put that over competency, over skill, over acumen, over deep practice? And so equality of opportunity, yes,
but not equality of outcome.
Equality of outcome is Marxism. And it's very, very dangerous.
Yep.
You can't tell me that, well, we need more color. I heard that actress Ellen Pompeo, fucking, she's such a, and she's virtue signaling there. I'm sure she's a good person. I actually worked with her. I had a conversation with her one time at a outdoor mall, like for 10 seconds. But she's not she's been very cloistered. This is a human being who's been on a TV set or a movie set for most of her adult life, and not somebody who I'm going to look to. Who has a whole lot of experience. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But
in that domain she does, but maybe perhaps.
But she's saying, I think we need more color. I want more color. That I get it. That, of course, that's fine. But not at the expense of competency, not at the expense of expertise. So let's make sure that everybody who is on that playing field earned it and is there because they are really good at what they do and won that position. It's very condescending to say, well, you're a certain color or a certain gender, and we're going to include you even though you might not have the skill set.
Yeah,
these
they
diversity,
discourage competition. I'm navigating this with my kids right now. I see it.
Yeah, these diversity initiatives are now. Having said that, I do think, and this is going to be this is a sort of a I'm gonna say something kind of left wing, and I have a natural aversion to the left. They just I think they're unreasonable, but I do think that the left plays a role. Mm-hmm. I think compassionate people who are on the left are important and are needed, and I do understand when a company like Netflix or whatever says we want more diversity, we want to have these programs that include women, include minorities. I think that that's also good because what happens is women and minorities who are competent get in and they get an opportunity in this impossible business when it was primarily white men. Mm-hmm. It just was. So there is a positive to it. So I'm not entirely right. I mean, I can understand how it's just the principle that scares me. It's the principle that scares me. It becomes an ideology, and I worry about that.
How would you say we keep that ideology in control? Because I see it in the educational system as well. A discouragement of, let's not reward the outcome necessarily. Let's discourage, they talk about competition differently, and I don't know how to navigate ourselves away from that.
When educators and when corporations ignore the science, ignore the scholarship, and allow the activists and the ideologues to control the conversation, the narrative, and the direction of policy, we're in deep shit.
So how do you get out of that?
And nowadays, when you say that men and women are genetically and behaviorally and mentally different, and here's all the evidence, you get fired from Google because you created an unsafe work environment. Google's an unsafe work environment. You fucking pussies. You're in your cafeteria. Google? Yeah, because all those male software engineers, they're so dangerous. Get the fuck out of it. This is the kind of lack of perspective. You don't know anybody who works with their hands. You probably don't know anybody who fucking is in the military. It just bothers me. Do you know anybody who smokes? Like, do you travel the country like I do? Do you interface with real people who work for a living? Because they're just as smart as you are. They just have a different set of realities. But that's the kind of stuff I really kind of resent. And so we better be very careful. Better be very careful when activists tell you that vaccines are dangerous across the board, and there's a measles outbreak and puts my kid's life at risk. I'm going to war with you, motherfucker. I'm going to war with you. You ignorant. You're ignorant. That's when we get into this idea of a nation defines itself on what it's willing to fight for, human beings do too. It's good to ask yourself what your lines are, and it's good to ask yourself when you're willing to fight. Because if you don't have lines, then you're probably not a fully formed human being. And sometimes those lines are going to be really tough to defend, and you might lose some stuff. And it's going to be scary. It's going to be the unknown. It's going to be chaos. But define those lines for yourself and stand up for it. And I do think that there's a loud group of small group of loud activists who are not interested in science or scholarship. They're interested in an agenda. And
they're the vocal minority, and they seem to consume the vast majority of the bandwidth.
They're also controlling our education, so that my son is being educated according to their dictums, their criteria, and I think they are the enemy, and I will be fighting them. As soon as you tell my son that he's toxically masculine or that men are the cause of all kinds of problems,
we have a problem.
I have a big problem, because men are also the ones who came up with things like the pill and the tampon, and we're not all bad. We came up with concepts like democracy and feminism, and these are important concepts. Humanism. Read Yuval Harari's book.
He's the one who wrote *Sapien*, right?
Great book.
Yeah, I'm reading his second
argument.
one. I'm reading his second one.
I've not read that one.
I forget what it's called.
Yeah, but there are, and I think Jordan Peterson, has been really great at articulating these things.
He's outstanding. He's precise.
And he's not a right winger. This idea, right wing adjacent, these weird terms. He's a scholar. He's a real scholar who spent a lot of time thinking about these things, way more than any of us has. He's had that. That was his job.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. I'm just curious how far the pendulum is going to swing, or how far we will allow it to swing.
Americans don't like extremes. Americans don't like extremists.
Unfortunately, though, extremism is winning in this country.
Yeah.
Actually, no. I tell you what. I'm going to take that back. If you only pay attention to social media and Twitter, extremism is winning. I think about, to throw a random ass number out there, I'd say 98% of people in this country land more in the middle than they do at the extremes.
I agree 100%, and I say that at my stand-up, and everybody starts clapping. The Russians are very active in bots and in swaying the Twitter. Yeah,
Joe was talking about this yesterday.
Yeah, listen to Sam Harris had Renee DiResta on, and she does a great job of showing. She was like, "What's going on here?
Yeah.
This whole vaccination issue. Most people believe in vaccinations, but because there's measles outbreaks, but there's all these kind of Twitter feeds creating this huge argument. She found out it was mostly Russian people doing it. Let me pee out of my huge dick, and then I'll come right back.
Yeah, no worries.
All right.
What the hell are we talking about?
I don't know.
We were talking about how far the pendulum is going to swing on the activism, and Joe was talking. I was talking to Jamie yesterday because I asked him, how in the hell do they, as a team, Joe and Jamie, handle the volume of feedback that they get? And this goes to when we were talking. I think I was talking with you or somebody else when Joe was apologizing for
Jack Dorsey.
Yeah. And to me, as I mean, and of course anybody can listen to it however they want to. I found him to be, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but honest and open and willing to. Because I look at a guy who's a CEO, and of course he doesn't know who exactly is getting blocked because he has no bandwidth for that shit. No. But I was just, and so the Joe end actually apologizing. He's like, we'll have him on again, which is another sign of transparency to me. And maybe I'm have a bag over my head and I can't see it clearly. But talking to Jamie about how they handle the feedback, and he said it's almost becoming, and I'm not speaking for him, I'm just kind of paraphrasing what he's saying, but it's almost becoming unmanageable because people are using the same. There's websites out there that can create likes and dislikes and completely drive. If a dude's got a bad attitude and $50 on his hands, he can basically go out there and make anything look like anything if he has the desire to do so.
Yeah. And
I don't know how you navigate that.
Well, that's the responsibility of Facebook and these companies. They have to figure out an algorithm to figure that out. They have to have a firewall, and I think they will.
Yeah.
Especially for these Russian bloggers and these Russian.
Well, it'll
guys,
always be chess, right? For every mechanism they put in place, somebody will find a way around it.
Yeah, and it's up to us to be able to. First of all, I don't read the feedback. Okay, I told you never to do that. I don't read the feedback.
Some of it's hilarious.
Yes, but I don't care, and I do what I do, and I don't care.
It's actually probably the healthiest approach. Is just to
Well, I
Stay
just know
away
who
from
I
it.
am, and I know what I'm doing. And oh, by the way, I'm also not my own biggest fan. So whatever you're saying about me, I probably kind of agree with. So fuck off. Some guy on
Most
Rogan.
people are just saying you're gay.
Right. Well, that's fine too. I agree. I'm at least 10% that too. But I, one guy was like, I did Rogan one time, and he's like, hey, dude, all you do is fucking mention books, and you're trying to teach us you're trying to tell us how smart you are, and you just like, it's like I'm smarter, and you could even listen to what they were saying. And I was like, fuck, I think he's kind of right. And I was like, I think that was an intelligent assessment of what I did. And because I kind of felt it, I was like, am I talking too much? I'd read a bunch of stuff, and I was like, I just wasn't listening enough. And I go, you're kind of right, dude. And he goes, fuck, I just went from hating you to following you. But, he was right. He was right.
You got to be careful, though, because there are people out there who have nothing but time on their hands in a shitty life situation, and they just want to share.
Yes, but I don't care about those people. Somebody's like,
problem is
don't go on Reddit because they're so mean.
The problem is a lot of people do care about those people. And what I'm trying to say is use that shit with caution.
Yeah,
and kind of like you're saying, though, too, if you only listen to the positive, that's a confirmation bias, and it might lead you down a terrible path. And if you only focus on the negative, you might be completely paralyzed to do anything.
Yeah, but constructive criticism, they start making stuff up. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not.
Like I said,
I don't care.
The best comment from the podcast yesterday was simple, clean, and concise. Just fuck you, Joe Rogan.
That's the best. That's the best.
It's like, sir.
Yeah.
Could you write more so I can understand where you're coming from, or is that your entire statement?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people write stuff and they just don't even mean it. They're just having a moment. They're just like.
That's the challenge I have raising my. Does your 10-year-old have a cell phone yet?
She sure does.
It's an interesting ecosystem trying to shepherd my two sons in one's in high school now, the other one starts next year, and just the consequences that can come from something that seems to exist only in the ether, and how it can hop from a device to the real world.
I do this. I always freak out. I go, am I losing my kids to the iPad? Am I losing my children to the phone? Is that what's happening? I start to freak out. They're like, no. Like I'll create.
Mine would just ignore me because they're paying attention to the phone as opposed to me.
I talk about stuff that my kids can hear. I'm always like. These iPads are stealing my children away from me. They're stealing the most important thing in the world. I'll be talking and they can hear me, but I'm acting outraged.
Yeah.
I'll create drama around it. Then they're like, we're not being taken away from you. I go, well, yar.
Yeah. What's next for you, man?
I'm waiting to see if my TV show gets picked up. I will continue to write stand-up for the rest of my life until I die. I will meditate until I reach a higher plane, and I can. I want to become enlightened so I can wear robes, change my name, write a book called You Can Too or something, and then I want to hold seminars, and I want to and I'm not going to say anything. I'll just sit in the lotus position, and I will stare benevolently at my followers, and then we'll have cry-ins. We'll all just cry.
And they'll pay you for this opportunity?
They'll pay me a lot of money. You'll be my chief of security and my enforcer. And that's the wrong way to put it. You'll be the one to keep things purified. And if we have things that need to be removed from the equation, like whistleblowers, well, you'll take them.
That's my role. That's where I would step in and handle things.
And I'll have a little mic and I'll go like this. Move in. That's all I say.
Again, far too much thought thinking about that.
Just all you need to do. I need you in a black ninja outfit,
which nobody has ever worn.
Do you SEALs not carry throwing stars? What kind of blade do you guys use?
I bet you guys had a throwing star on them before. I've seen a variety of knives, from Leathermans to fully custom pieces that would equally suck at cutting butter as it would flesh, and you would never use it anyway because that shit doesn't happen.
It's my favorite. You mean you don't get up close and personal, take a guy out with a whole contingent with a knife?
Only if things have gone incredibly bad, and then I would die wondering where my knife was because I didn't have it.
That's very
The misconceptions abound. It's unbelievable. What else you want to talk about? Let's talk about getting some food.
All right, let's go eat.
Food?
Yeah. Let me cook for you, Andy.
You get so weird sometimes.
I know. Let me.
You can't beat that meal we had last night. That was delightful.
Via Veneto, brother.
My God. You would have walked by it thinking it was. You just would have thought it was a shop. You just would have walked by.
Little storefront, no sign. It's the best kept
20
secret.
feet wide, maybe?
Yeah. They're not giving that food away. If you go, don't blame me. It's going to cost you money, but it'll be the best meal you ever had.
Yeah.
And that wine that
Unbelievable.
my boy Simone, I just tasted Simone. Surprised me, and he's like,
He did.
"Hey, I have something for you."
He did. He navigated us through
It just got better and better.
That's what I'm saying.
The wine got better and better.
Yeah.
You know,
Awesome.
and we got a little drunk, and that was great.
It was great.
Andy, thanks
That's like
for,
2 hours,
Thanks
dude.
for having me on Cleared Hot. That took 2 hours?
Hour 50 is where we're at.
Wow, that went by fast. Cleared Hot with Andy Stump.
Yeah, I usually open the podcast with that, so you don't need to say it at the end.
That's what I say right before I gift a woman my essence. Cleared Hot.
And we're done. That's it for this week, everyone. Thanks again to BioWave, the VA-recognized, VA-prescribed, FDA-cleared, and made in America effective and safe tool for blocking pain at the source. If you or someone you love need safe, non-opioid, effective help managing pain, go to biowave.com and learn how to get BioWave at no cost. And also, thank you again to Murderbook, the new true crime podcast hosted by best-selling author Michael Connelly, available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Also, be sure to check out Dark Sacred Night, Michael Connelly's latest #1 bestseller featuring detectives Harry Bosch and Renee Ballard. And that is about it for this week. I don't think I have anything new to tell anybody about, other than if you are new to the podcast and you want to help me out as an individual or help the podcast out, do me a favor. Go to iTunes and rate the podcast. And also, write a review. Good, bad, ugly. I always say this, and I'm sure people are tired of hearing it, but if you hate the podcast, go write a review and say it sucks and tell me why. And if I can do something about it, I will. If you love the podcast, awesome. Tell somebody about it. And if you have time or you haven't done it, do me a favor, write a review on iTunes. But that's really about it. Been selling quite a few of the Cleared Hot shirts that I was wearing on the Rogan episode. Everybody who's buying those things, thank you again also for the support. It's probably equally, if not greater support than writing the iTunes review, because if you wear that shirt, it helps me spread the word about the podcast, which I guess at the end of the day is what I'm really trying to do. And that's it for episode 72. See you next week for episode 73.